Welcome to Evangelicalish, where we discuss the good, the bad, and the ugly of the American evangelical church, deconstruction, faith, and God's love through it all. And make sure and stay current on ish happenings on Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook at Evangelicalish. That's evangelical with an ish. Now to Paul, Jeremy, and April on this episode of Evangelical-ish.
Welcome into the Evangelicalish podcast. I'm Jeremy.
I'm Paul.
And it is so good to see each and every single one of you on the live this evening. And for those of you who are listening later on your favorite podcasting platform, we're super grateful for you as well, always. And if you would do us a favor, wherever your favorite podcast platform is, whether you're listening on Apple or Spotify, do us a favor, leave a review, give 5 stars, and write a little comment. Let people know why they should be listening to Evangelicalish. It just helps us add to the conversation and grow really good ideas. And so we would be super grateful for that. Just a reminder, April is still out for another couple of weeks at least, as she is doing some really exciting professional things. Her spouse is doing some really exciting professional things, which also means a move for them. They are vacating the great state of Tennessee. So I don't know if that's positive or negative, but it is what it is. Anyway, we've definitely missed April the last few weeks, but she'll be out at least until the end of May. And so we were super blessed and thankful.
Blessed.
Yeah, we were blessed and highly favored to have Janice Legata join us for April. And then now we've got another guest host that will be joining us for the next couple of weeks. So I don't want to spoil any of the fun there. Last but never least, if you want to join the ish community, go to evangelicalish.com. That's evangelical with an ISH at the end, evangelicalish.com. You can come and you can join the community there. It's $4.99 a month, and it's just a good way to support the content that we are working to put out. And we want to put good content out so that you are empowered and you feel heard and seen in the deconstruction journey, the ex-evangelical journey, whatever your journey is. Everyone's respected and loved here. Last but never least, in the housekeeping, and probably most importantly, the queen of rock and roll, Tina Turner, Miss RESPECT herself.
Wait, that wasn't her, was it?
Oh, no.
That was Aretha.
Oh, that was Aretha Franklin.
Aretha was,
sorry. Yeah, Aretha
Tina Turner
Franklin.
was Rolling on the River. Baby.
Yeah, Rolling on the River. Yeah, that's right. Anyway, but Tina Turner passes away today, I believe, at the age of 82. And so definitely a bummer. I read something that I read a quote earlier. Somebody said that she made 82 trips around the sun and it still feels like not enough. And that's absolutely fair. And so
you're getting slammed now for
I know. I'm sorry. I said that with haste and I just wasn't thinking. I'm sorry.
Oh, Fogarty was Rolling on the River and Tina covered it. Well, if we're going to talk music, we need to bring in our guest co-host for today.
That's right. Save us.
She knows music, and Malynda Hale joins us. And Melinda's a singer, actress, and also the host of We Need to Talk, the We Need to Talk podcast. And save us, Malynda, as we talk about music here.
Shaking my head at you, Jeremy. And she was 83, so you got 2 things wrong.
Is that right?
5 seconds.
Okay, I thought I had the age down right.
Wow, she was 83. Simply the best, proud Mary.
What's love got to do with it?
What's love got to do with it? And what I also love about her journey is that she didn't go solo until her mid-40s, because there was always Ike and Tina Turner. So you can get success at any age. I think that's wonderful.
Yeah, absolutely.
I haven't seen her. I haven't seen her recently. I would love to see what she looked like towards the end of her life there. But
there's a great documentary on her called Tina. I think it's on Hulu, but it's really fascinating just to see, how she moved to Switzerland and just wanted to get out of the United States away from all of the nonsense.
Genius.
But she was just an absolutely beautiful human being, well into her later years of life, and yeah, she was amazing. We it seems like we've lost a lot of musical talent in recent years. It just, Prince and Bowie and Freddie Mercury and and George Michael and now Tina Turner. Just we've lost a lot of people, haven't
All the
we?
legends. Yeah.
Well, Freddie Mercury wasn't recent.
That's true. That's true.
You want to get technical.
Yeah.
It seems recent because I watched Bohemian Rhapsody, not
I was like, Freddie Mercury's been dead almost as long as I've been alive.
Wow, I don't know about that.
What year did Freddie Mercury pass away?
That's a good question. It was a long time ago, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yes.
When did he died in 91? Okay, so it's been a while.
Yeah, so I was.
Gosh, it doesn't seem that long.
Oh, November 24th of 1991. So I was 3.
I get it,
Wow,
though. I get it,
that's
Paul. When
crazy.
people say a couple of years ago, I think it's 2000.
Yeah, that's true. Yes.
Time has just been smashed together. Yes.
I'm
I mean, even Michael Jackson, it's been a long time since he passed away, right? So,
Yeah.
It was that like what 2009, 2010, somewhere.
Yeah,
in
around
there.
there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so but it does feel like, I guess the reason it may feel that way, Paul, is because there are only so many like lifetime talents, right? Like there's people who just transcend greatness and become iconic, like Tina Turner, Michael Jackson, Freddie Mercury,
Whitney Houston.
Yeah, Whitney Houston is another great example. Prince, as we mentioned earlier. So I guess like
Biggie and Tupac.
Yeah, a death every 10 years. Absolutely, Tupac. He is not dead though; he's alive.
Oh no!
Don't get me started on this. I have gone into this several times on this show. Tupac is still alive.
In your heart.
In Cuba. No.
Oh, really?
I don't know. But yeah, it probably feels close. Like even if it's every like 5 years or 3 years, like it feels heavy just because those like generational lifetime, like bigger than life talents are so impactful. I think just on our culture in general, right?
Yeah.
Like whether you're a music person or not, like it just hits different. And so, yeah, I agree with you, Paul. I was giving you a hard time, but I definitely agree with you.
And I'm actually like, I feel sorry for those of you who, weren't into your cognitive years when Freddie was still alive, because he was awesome.
I watch so many Freddie Mercury videos, man. He is just unbelievable. Yeah. Unbelievable. Is there anybody, Malynda, let me ask you this question. Okay. And I know we want to get into our topic for sure, but I think, I think having you on, as an artist yourself, I put out a couple of singles. I love music as well.
I sing in the shower.
You sing in the shower and great every time, I might add. But I want to ask you this, like, who in your mind, like in the right now, is that talent? You know what I mean? Like, is there anybody right now that feels like a Tina, like a Prince, like a Whitney? Is there like people that you know by one name, like,
yeah, Madonna. There are, obviously it does depend on who you ask. Everybody has different tastes, but I think that you can't really deny the showmanship, the entertainment factor, and honestly, the vocal quality of Beyonce. I think that in terms of like following in a Tina Turner's footsteps, she comes the closest in terms of how she presents herself, just the amount of endurance she has during a show. Like what she does is pretty phenomenal. I think also Bruno Mars is up there with being a really phenomenal artist in terms of his writing and his vocal ability and his performance. So I think we have less, I will say, than we did back then for sure. But I think there will be a few people that are definitely icons in the future.
That'll be interesting. I guess I don't equate Bruno as like a transcendent talent like Prince was, or. But so interesting. But I
look at his resume. I think you'd be surprised because he's written songs for so many artists that people don't even know that he wrote them.
Yes.
And it's that back behind the scenes things that I always take into account, being an artist and being a songwriter myself, that you realize, oh, these people are incredibly talented beyond what they do as their solo artists.
Every time they're putting the pen to the paper, it's a hit. Yeah. It may not be their hit, but it's a hit.
Exactly.
It would not, like Madonna, speaking of one names, Madonna or Cher, would they be sort of the godmothers of music right now?
Yeah, I think so. I mean,
Barbra Streisand, maybe
this generation. I think that they definitely have their legend icon status for their genre, and they will always be household names for sure. So they're probably coming up on being, the last few. Celine Dion, Barbra Streisand, in terms of vocalists in that way.
Yeah. I want my girl Rihanna to be that. But
I love her. But she's not gonna do music anymore. She's like, I'm doing too
good. that's the thing, is like she just hit the brakes on it. And I think it's gonna be like, at the end of the day, it's gonna be like a lack of like a library, right? Like she put out hit after hit, but it was like she started putting out albums like 5, 6, 7 years apart. And so I think that's, and Dolly Parton.
Dolly
Kate
in our comments says, don't forget Dolly Parton.
Yeah.
I have a feeling, I'm gonna throw a name out there. I have a feeling that we all know I do love Rihanna. Oh my gosh. She's just so freaking talented. I love her. But I have a feeling that Chris Stapleton may be entering into that space too, because he's another guy like Bruno who has written hits for like so many people. He's written for Pink and Taylor Swift and just folks you wouldn't even know. And I was listening to Pink, who, by the way, killed the national anthem on her own accord.
So underrated and underappreciated.
Absolutely. Oh my God. Had like the flu or something at the same time, strep throat or whatever, murdered it. Like
she popped up in my YouTube feed, if I can interrupt it, the other day, singing "What's Going On." Pink did, and she blew the doors off with it, and I was like, "Wow, that was incredible."
And it's very sad.
Yeah.
She said what's so frustrating is like Chris Stapleton is like legitimately like the nicest guy in the room. I saw an interview with her. She's like, he's legitimately like the most humble guy in the room. Like, it's just like, yeah, it's cool. Like when they were writing together, he was like, I don't have to sing on this. Like, you could get somebody better. And she's like, what the fuck do you mean? And then she herself said like it's Whitney and Chris like for Super Bowl national anthems, which nobody's ever going to top Whitney, I don't think.
Right.
But they didn't do it pregnant though. Remember, keep that in mind when you're thinking of your girl Rihanna. So.
But she didn't. She did the halftime.
Yeah, she didn't do the national anthem. I got you. Yeah,
but,
you're right.
No, but no, listen. Don't even get me started on that. She slayed. She slayed while baking another person in her womb. Like,
but so you guys are younger than me, and so maybe you don't know when Madonna came out in a wedding dress on MTV Video Music Awards and crawled across the stage. It changed the world forever. And it certainly changed the world of this little boy right here. I can tell you that. But she knocked us all off our ends and changed everything forever.
That's when Paul Swearingen lost his innocence.
Maybe I'd lost it a little bit before that. But I ain't gonna lie. That was like, holy crap,
Yeah. I think Lady Gaga is kind of that person of this generation that's like bringing the crazy factor, like wearing the meat dress and
and again, not our topic today, but Malynda, where would you put Ariana and Taylor Swift in all of that?
Ooh.
Taylor, in terms of songwriting, she's definitely up there. She's not a vocalist that I, seek or go to, she's not a vocalist that I would choose to just like listen to her, but I appreciate her artistry and I love how involved she is in her own career. Ariana has a great tone to her voice. She just doesn't use consonants when she sings, and I've never understood it.
I will have to go back and listen to that.
Well, but she does she was on that show that Jimmy Fallon hosts, her and like Kelly Clarkson, which is another just incredible vocal talent, right? But she was on there, and when she covers people, she changes, and it's I'm like, why don't you just do that all the time?
Yeah,
because she
did that on Saturday Night Live too, and it was really amazing. But anyway, I guess this isn't our topic for tonight, is it?
No, but I think in honor of
but
Tina
also,
Turner,
by the way, she's a Nepo, so those are you got to take away a little credit from her for that.
In honor of Tina Turner and her legacy, I think it's good to definitely not only attribute the correct songs to her, Jeremy, but then also just I think it's a great conversation to start things off with.
Yeah.
But
and by the way, again, being the old guy, Bruce Springsteen has to be in the conversation.
Stop it.
Bruce
Bruce
amazing.
You miss me with Bruce, man.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. He's only had hit albums in 5 decades, but other than that, who is he? Yeah, you're right. Go for it.
I love that clap back. 5 decades worth of hits, but yeah, whatever you were saying.
But yeah, he's a flash in the pan, that guy.
Oh yeah, Bono and U2. Man, we could go on forever. All right.
Yeah, we could.
All right. So let's talk about tonight. Some of y'all may have seen the title coming out of the gate, and it was Trauma or Nah. So in other words, we're going to be talking about religious trauma in particular, especially coming off the back of last week's episode. If you haven't had a chance, go back and listen. And just talking about kind of realizing our religious trauma, giving ourselves permission to experience that religious trauma or accept it. And then also, have we been the trauma at times as well? And so I think those are all going to be really interesting conversations. So I just want to pose kind of a broad question for both of you to kind of start out. Kind of tell me about your religious experience. And Paul, I know you probably shared some of this on the show, but just to refresh folks and people will be able to hear Malynda's side of the story as well and her journey. But kind of tell folks your experience with Christianity or American evangelicalism growing up and just kind of your perspective on that as we dive off into this topic.
Who do you want to go first?
Let's absolutely go with Malynda. I want to hear her
okay.
first.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So my experience is a little different than most people's. I actually never went through, for example, the whole deconstruction movement. I always grew up in a very, very liberal household. I grew up in an AME church, which is African Methodist Episcopal Church, and it's in a historical Black church landmark in Santa Barbara, California, which if you've been to Santa Barbara, it is an aggressively white town. So to have, that's the only way to describe it.
Aggressively white. All right.
There's no other way to describe it. So to have that home for the small Black community that was there was very, very special. So, my mom was the churchgoer. My dad really wasn't a churchgoer, but she was always very, very liberal and always just led with love. So that's what I always grew up with. So my understanding of Jesus's teachings and the Gospels was always on a more progressive side. Now, I made my own decision to go to a Christian school, not really knowing what conservatism was or evangelicalism. So when I arrived at college, that first day, I was really taken aback because that's when I got entered into this world that I was so confused by because this wasn't at all what I was taught. And I learned a lot about, people's views. It was one of the first years I could vote. I was literally the only Democrat in the school. And the things that were said to me of how can you not vote for a Christian, or I'm so ashamed of you, or you're going to hell if you don't vote for Bush. And I'm like,
Bush?
No, if that's right. But okay. And I, even when I would dating people that didn't go to the school or weren't necessarily a Christian, talking about, oh, but the Bible says you can't be yoked with non-believers.
Yeah.
And I even said to one person, I was like, well, what if I bring him to God? They're like, you shouldn't be doing missionary dating. That's what they called.
Oh.
You shouldn't be doing missionary dating. And I was like, you people are crazy. That's just what my experience was. And so coming out of that environment, I always joke that I went in liberal and I came out super, super liberal, because I knew exactly what I didn't want to be in terms of a Christian, but it actually strengthened my relationship with God and my belief in Jesus. And I knew exactly what I wanted to be and how I wanted to be. Now, moving from that, I went into being a worship leader in several different environments. And I would say that at least my experience with the quote unquote trauma was that people of color were always able to serve in that way, give a musical gift, but our voices were never, for some reason, allowed at the pulpit. In the three churches, the churches that I served at that were non-denominational, which was, typically ended up being an evangelical conservative environment, that's what we were used for. And so I started to feel like, well, does my voice not matter outside of me singing? Because I have a lot to say about this. And I eventually retired from being a worship leader, which was probably the best decision for me. But I also was on the receiving end of other people's trauma, just like things that I mentioned before from school, but even in those church environments, not thinking that my gay friends were going to hell, or, living with my husband before we got married, just things like that. And that rhetoric that was used against me, and people having opinions about how I was leading my life, when out of all those people complaining, I was one of the only ones that was always volunteering with nonprofits, going into the inner city and giving back and like doing the things that Christians are supposed to do. So it was imagine that. So the experience was really up and down, but I really didn't get into it into my adult years. But I was lucky that I got into it in my adult years, because I knew exactly how to clap back and I knew it was nonsense. But if I had learned that stuff growing up, I obviously would have been going through the deconstruction phase. I think just my personality, I would have ended up on this side anyway. But I was glad that I didn't experience that growing up. And I'm very grateful to my mom for just raising me in a loving household, so that when I came up against it, when I was 18 plus, I was like, no, you're wrong. That's not right.
Yeah. Wow.
Well, shout out to moms too.
Yes,
by the way, like wherever you're at, wherever you're listening.
And by the way, I saw that Sasha Obama graduated from USC over the weekend, and I was reading a story about that. And one of the other
graduated from college.
I know, isn't that crazy?
We're getting old.
Isn't that crazy? And one of the quotes in the LA Times was, "We all kind of knew Sasha because she's one of the few Black students on campus at USC." And I was like, whoa, so
USC
also aggressively white USC. Wow. Yeah.
It shouldn't be though. That's weird.
Which is in the, right on the edge of Watts, which is just such a weird thing for me. Huh. So for me, it was interesting. We had Darren Slade on last week from, his religious research organization, and talking about religious trauma that many of us, and it's part of what we do here on this podcast, is we laugh at how we were taught about the rapture, and we laugh about how we were taught about purity culture. And we can look back now and laugh. But for him last week to then say, no, here's what trauma is. If something triggers this response, it's trauma. And to realize, oh yeah, that's what religion did to me as a child. And as a child of a conservative evangelical pastor, who also happened to be an extremely abusive father, in his raise up the child ways, and in his, we don't go to mental health professionals. We just take it to the cross, brother. We just take it to the cross. And so instead of getting help for his conditions, he just took it out on his sons. It's, I guess we laugh to keep from crying, but now looking back, that defined God to me. God was a creature on a throne in heaven that would turn his back on his own son on the cross. And so certainly if I was tingling because Madonna was on TV, certainly that God would turn his back on me, and was just itching to fire me into, the pit of hell for all of eternity. And so and then we were very rapture focused. And so every day of my life as a child was an idea that there was this God who, if I just happened to be doing the wrong thing, listening to the wrong song, looking at the wrong cover of a magazine, I would be left behind and faced with the choice of mark of the beast and all these things. And looking back now, it's like, yeah, I was living under a really false, onerous, horrific religious ideology that has impacted me to this day. And as I do what I do on social media stuff, people say, well, you're just hurt by the church. And my answer to that now is like, absolutely, I was hurt by the church 100%, and I'm working through it. And so was Jesus, but that didn't invalidate his voice. So you can be an asshole in raising me in trauma, but you don't get to be an asshole in shutting down my voice because of it today. So I think it's just important to know, it's been important for me to know, yeah, that really was a mental health injuring religious belief system. And it's why I'm so adamant in speaking out against it as it's played out in our society today.
Yeah.
That's such a unique perspective. I think that so many people can resonate with both of you, like either being impacted, like attacked from the evangelical culture, or being indoctrinated by it, and therefore you're still under attack, I guess, in a sense, but you're kind of in the midst of it. And so I think both brings their own trauma, their own issues. And Paul, obviously my journey very similar to yours in the sense of that I was raised in it, that fundamentalism was who we were. And, I think what's hard for me to understand is that today, as I'm working to rebuild my relationship with my parents and, people from kind of that life, like, I think they thought that they were doing the right things,
Sure.
as they are like deconstructing and like walking away from a lot of that themselves. And I think that's the challenging part that just continues to kind of push and pull on my heart is like, how angry should I be, or how outspoken should I be? But I think I agree with you. I think at the end of the day, like, I should not be silenced because of all of this, this trauma that we so often carry out of the evangelical space. But I think,
and if I could jump in there, the idea of hurt people. So I can have empathy for the backstory of my parents, that they were doing what they thought they were supposed to do to get us to heaven. But because they had been trained by really shitty theology, they were really shitty parents, and it rolls downhill. And I don't mean to interrupt that much, but just we've got to quit doing this bad theological training, so we quit passing this horrible theology down through the generation.
Well, and I think that's exactly what I was going to say. Is like, at the end of the day, if I, as a husband, tell my wife every day that I love her, I love you, I love you, I love you every single day. And, I do right by her and we have a good relationship, but then toward the end of her life, I set her on fire, and watch her burn
because she didn't worship you enough.
Am I really a loving husband? The answer is clearly no.
Right.
And so we have to ask the same question of God. And that doesn't transcend like, well, God's love has to be tough and just and whatever, but God's love can't transcend morality in my mind. Like what is right and good and loving and kind still cannot come outside of the bounds of what is right and good and loving and kind. And burning people in effigy forever that you created feels not great. And so with that considered, I think it does mean that we have to speak loudly.
But it teaches us that love is transactional.
Yeah.
That true love is transactional.
That's exactly. I was going to say, I saw something the other day that said, why is hell truly the only place where all are welcome, but heaven is conditional?
Ooh. Wow.
And I was like, that's it. That is it.
Wow. I mean, if you think about it, like when my children were young and, say my son was playing baseball and he broke my neighbor's window, my son would not be responsible for that happening. Now, there may be some sort of punishment to keep him off his phone for a while or something, but ultimately, I'm responsible for that. I paid the price for the window to be repaired. I go to my neighbor and apologize and all of those things. So why would an omnipotent, omniscient, omnipresent, all loving God not be able to say, listen, son, if you say a cuss word, I'll cover that for you. And you don't have to worship me for it. I do that for my son because he's my son. And why is there a God in heaven that doesn't have the capacity, when he's infinitely greater than me, to cover that sin for me? Yeah. And even if we go to but he did it through Jesus. Well, why did he have to beat the shit out of his own son to do it when he's the setter of the rules? He's the omnipotent, omniscient overseer of it all. It doesn't make sense. And thus it creates this traumatic transactional view of goodness and love.
Mm. Yeah, I think that's so good. But that is Americanism, right? Like transactional anything is part of the American dream. Like it's just how we operate. Like I have to get something if I give you something. And we don't comprehend unconditional kindness or love well at all. And so our relationship with God has to be transactional. Yeah. And we are also so competitive as people inside of this culture that like God loves me, but he may not love you. Right? Like God loves me first. And so it's this thing, it's like, I used to always ask my Calvinist friends who believe that, that God has predestined who will go to heaven and hell before they're ever born. And I'm like, you say you serve a loving God who's just creating people to let them burn in effigy for eternity? Like
just think about it for one second.
Yeah. Just put that through a cognitive filter. And so, but my question is like, well, if that is true and you really truly don't know who has been elect and who has not been, like, what if it ain't you? Like what if, but what's funny is they're always the ones going to heaven. Mm-hmm. Every single time. And that's the issue is that it has become transactional and I'm the winner. Mm-hmm. Right. It's NFL trade deadline. Like I will absolutely win. I will get the best pieces and the best parts. And that's an issue.
If God's love is transactional, then it gives me permission to have transactional love as well. And so I get to say about the poor, the foreigner, the marginalized, and the widow, maybe you earned that place and I can look down on you and I'm not responsible for you.
But you have to think about it. That's why so many of them are not able to love their neighbor as they love themselves, because that's what their version of love is.
Bang.
Yeah.
All of that. Because Jesus never said, love your neighbor as yourself because y'all are assholes. That's not what he said.
Like, although I kind of like that saucy Jesus.
Listen, I'm about a saucy Jesus.
Love your neighbor as yourself, as long as they're meeting your standards of goodness and righteousness.
Yeah. Love your neighbor as yourself. Don't be a dick. But anyway, sorry. But I think that for a lot of time, in evangelical culture, we were taught, I was just preaching about this the other day at church, like, we were taught so often in evangelical culture growing up, it's because we're so evil and we're sinners and we think of ourselves first and we don't care about anybody else. Right. And then that is innately who we are. But I think what Jesus was really saying is that, man, a lot of y'all don't love yourselves as much as you love your neighbors. Cause how many people like of us, right? Like we will put everything we can to the side to like help somebody out in our friend group or in our community that's struggling and that needs support. And we will burn ourselves out at work, like trying to do extra or, you know, for people around us or the family or the kids or, you know, whatever the case is. And then at the end of the day, we don't take care of ourselves. We don't do good self-care. We don't take care of our mental health. We trudge through our trauma without good coping mechanisms. Right. And we haven't loved ourselves at all.
Yep.
So exactly. I think this narrative of like, oh, how evil and despicable and gross you are, like we don't see that in Jesus's teachings. Like we just don't see it.
Yep.
No.
And again, it's why recognizing the trauma of bad religion is so important, because it gives us, again, that permission to look at others as others and try to impose it on others. And, you know, one of the things I do in the coaching that I do, and I've been talking to some business leaders, and we do, you know, a lot of DEI training, which is really important. But sometimes part of the problem of DEI training is we're telling people change so that other people's lives can be better. And I think it's much more effective to say change so your life can be better, and then goodness can flow through you that's transformational to others around you.
Yeah.
And so if I start to realize I'm not a piece of shit that God is some guy on a throne in heaven is looking down on as a terrible person, I can start to see myself differently, which allows me to see other people differently around me.
But I love that you said that, because I'm so about this, because I do think that diversity as a whole is one of the most beautiful things we can have. And you are a better person when you are exposed to other cultures, other walks of life, just different life experiences. That's why I feel like so many of them are so miserable, because they don't know anybody else. Truly. They don't know anybody else. They only know people that look like them, believe what they believe. They've never been out of their bubble. And so there's always this anger that's coming forth, and never like this love and freedom and acceptance, because they haven't learned self-love. They haven't learned how to truly love other people, because they don't know anybody.
You know, a lot of my friends in seminary were huge fans of, like, and I went to a very conservative seminary, and they were fans of like Jonathan Edwards, you know, whose most notable work is Sinners in the Hands of an Angry God. You know, like how would you, I mean, how do you feel about yourself every day if you're like, I'm absolute trash and God should bring his wrath on me, but thank goodness he's not, and he's going to bring his wrath on you. Like, it just makes you so angry and bitter. Like, you just walk around with that. No wonder there's so many like heart attacks and stuff inside of that culture. Like,
and and what about Mark Driscoll and his, who do you think you are, or his famous God hates you sermon. And, it's just so crazy. And my therapist was talking to me a while back about how part of what drives like an abuser or a molester is they want to steal a spark of life they see in somebody else that they sense they're missing in themselves. And then when they realize they can't steal that spark of life, then they're like, well, I'm going to douse it out then. I'll put it out because it mocks me. And I really think that trauma is what a lot of what we see in Christianity in America today is we're like, Christians are like, hey, you don't get to be free if I don't get to be free.
Yeah.
If I'm in bondage, I'm going to try to put you in bondage too.
I was just going to say, that's why there's such hate thrown towards the LGBTQ community, because that community is so unapologetically themselves and filled with self-love, because they are free, because they figured out how to be themselves. So that's exactly why that attitude happens towards them, for sure.
And how often, do we see folks who are the loudest voices of hate against our queer friends? They end up being people who are queer in the closet anyway. And it's because, listen, I think we've all discovered in a sense right? And this is part of the deconstruction or part of just the journey, right, for you, Malynda, but which I'm a little bit jealous, but no big deal. But like, imagine how angry and hurt and frustrated and depressed you're constantly being by not just being openly who you are. Like, I experienced that, and I didn't have anything as big as like my sexuality in the closet. It was just like my language and the fact that I liked whiskey and that I wanted to have really great sex with my wife, that, like, you know, people would think is a little bit weird, like in the evangelical space, right? Like, like all of those things that are very taboo, but like now being able to just be freely myself and to say those things out loud and say, you know, that I just all of those things. It's it is so freeing. So I couldn't imagine having even bigger pieces of yourself have to be pent up. Yeah. You know, just no wonder there's so much anger and bitterness and hate and rage.
Which also goes to the point of when they say, you know, you're choosing this lifestyle. Who would choose to feel like that on a daily basis? Who would choose that? Yes. Like, you're literally choosing to be miserable and having everyone hate you and ostracize you. Like, that has never made sense to me. Like, if they would just take a minute to think, would you actually choose this for yourself? No.
Well, and what I hear from my Christian friends now is like, well, those trans people, they're mentally, you know, it's just sad. They need mental help.
Gender dysphoria. They're experiencing mental health.
So, like, what do you want to do?
Yeah, they want to blame. Listen. They want to blame mental health for guns and all of the shootings, our kids dying in schools. They want to blame mental health for folks transitioning and becoming free and who they really feel like they're supposed to be. And at the end of the day, they're also the ones telling people not to go seek mental health support and to just pray about it and read your Bible more. Man, no wonder y'all are fucked up, because you haven't even gone and like figured it out for yourself. Like that's the thing. It's like you can't pin the tail on the donkey if you don't even know what a donkey looks like. Right.
And I think, you know, what I'm trying to express in this season, and I think some of the tumult that we're seeing is like spiritually and somewhere in the heavens, this is all coming to a head in this season. And maybe it's a special time where people have to decide, am I going to be the shithead I was back then, or am I going to lean into the pain of being transformed, self-sacrificing like Jesus said? And I think it's because we misunderstand that Jesus was saying, I didn't come to condemn, I came to reconcile. I haven't come to tell you you're bad. I've come to tell you that the people telling you you're bad are wrong. And once you realize you're not bad, your relationship with heaven and with others will naturally change as an outflow of that. And particularly if you really read the book of Romans with some understanding, which I have my issues with the Apostle Paul, but I do believe Romans is an amazing, beautiful, brilliant book that is ultimately saying, hey, you have rules because you're human, and you love the rules because it's how much can I get away with? You know, Texas is trying to put the 10 commandments in the classroom to say, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this. And Jesus' message was, no, get rid of those rules. And now start to say, what do I do as a human being with other human beings around me to make it on earth as it is in heaven? It's not about what can I get away with to avoid being hated by God. It's now the challenge is, it's not just about not committing adultery. It's how do you live in beautiful relationship with everybody around you? And I think if we could start to help people understand that Jesus was considered demonic and a Samaritan by religious people and would be considered so today if he were in America, then maybe some people can start to think, maybe we got the story just a little bit wrong.
But the cognitive dissonance,
it's incredible.
Is that, you know, they say a lot of the same things that we do, in the sense of like, well, Jesus, said hard things and flipped tables, and he wasn't, he called people whitewashed tombs and brood of vipers, and that's basically cussing them out in that culture, or whatever. But what they never connect that with is the fact that Jesus was always, in those times, addressing the religious establishment.
Yes.
It was never the sinners and the tax collectors that we see so often in scripture that they accuse Jesus of spending his time with. It was never the woman at the well. It was never the woman caught in adultery. It was never Zacchaeus. It was always, every single time, it was the religious establishment, the religious leaders, and the elite of the day. And they are, as much as they want to play the persecution card, I've said it a lot, you can't say you're persecuted if you're being an asshole. Like, you're just kind of reaping the rewards of the things that you're sowing. Okay. Yeah. But on top of that, like, you are the elite. You are the ones that, get to call the shots.
All Christians read the Bible thinking of themselves as Jesus and never as Saul of Tarsus.
I was just going to say they found a way to still make themselves. I'm like, I don't get it.
Yeah. Yes.
I always say every Christian at least once a year ought to be forced to read Jonah chapter 4 and put their own name in the place of Jonah.
That's so good.
And hear themselves saying, God, I want you to kill these people. I would rather be dead than live in a world where you have grace for those people, and really understand what we're saying there. And that God keeps saying to Jonah, how's it working out for you, Jonah?
Yeah. Yes.
Do you do well to think this way?
Do you do well to be angry? Yeah. Is the best question in that chapter that God asks like 3 different times to Jonah in this narrative, right? Whether you believe it's just really great poetry or literal, it doesn't really matter where you like end up as far as the story in and of itself, but the lesson out of that is so good. Do you do well to be angry? And he's like, yeah, of course I do well to be angry. Like, I just wish you would kill me, because I knew you were a God of grace. I knew as soon as you saw them, you were going to give them your love. Like, that is so much the American evangelical church of today, in that, God, well, why are you saving the gay people? Like, God, why do you want people to care about Black lives? Like, it's just, it's that same energy. But they're never Jonah in the story. They're God in the story. And that's how they continue to paint themselves.
And Jonah believed by his religious law that he had every right to hate the Ninevites. And it's quite possible they had even murdered somebody in his family. Like, by his religious law, he had every right to hate them and want them to be punished by God. And God is like, no, I'm not going to do it. And he's like, I knew you weren't going to do it. I knew it. Yeah. Son of a bitch. I knew it. That's why I wanted to go in there. Yeah.
So shout out that comment that you just put up from Mitchell Jennings. He's actually the community pastor at my church, and he's incredible, and just absolutely awesome. Just a super loving, caring guy. And for those of you wondering if we really mean that we're affirming at our church, Mitchell is a gay man serving on our pastoral staff. But yeah, we actually went through the entire book of Jonah, and he preached Jonah 4 for us here a few weeks ago. And I don't think you should sell yourself short, Mitchell. Your sermon was absolutely incredible, but Pastor Paul has some seasoning behind him.
I bring it every once in a while.
Every once in a while, I got a little something left in there.
Malynda, I would love to hear, so through the work you're doing now, how are you trying to maybe change some minds and hearts in this space around religious trauma or bad religious theology? The eye roll and the sigh was classic.
Come on, you guys. it's exhausting. Sometimes, you're so on fire. Like, I'm going to go back and forth with this person for hours. And other times I literally just like, I'm out. Like, I'm blocking. I'm moving on because I can't do it. I have no energy. I'm like, God's still working on me. So I'm going to block somebody today. I think I'm really just trying to introduce, I guess, just the power of empathy to people. I think that there's such a lack of empathy for other people, and I'm trying to get back to the basics with so many people. Like, if that was your son, is this truly how you would respond and react? If this was your friend, if this was your neighbor, someone you know closely, like, how would you respond to this, just in general? And I try to have dialogue with people in terms, because sadly, religion and politics nowadays, the lines are so blurred. But in terms of what they are standing for, who they're voting for, I just go back to, how does this align with the teachings of Jesus? Now that's when I get blocked. Because nobody wants to answer and actually have that conversation, which I know you all know. So everything I do, I just try to lead with love.
Say that.
No matter what I do. So I'm trying to be an example, is really the short answer that I can give. I'm just trying to be an example, because I think most people that say I'm a Christian and make that their entire identity, I've found it to be the opposite, at least for what my understanding of what a Christian is supposed to be.
That's so good. Yeah, it's always the Twitter profile, like, follower of Jesus, husband to Aaron,
Patriot,
and Patriot, daddy of four,
yeah,
or whatever. It's
always.
Every time.
And the thing,
I don't even have to look. I just know,
And it's so frustrating that Christians have been taught not to think, not to be introspective, not to question. And again, back to the topic of the show, and it's the trauma that keeps them there. They are beaten, whipped dogs, and I'm not calling them dogs. I'm just, when a dog has been beaten and whipped, it's constantly ducking, waiting for the next whip to come. And it seems like American Christianity is, how can you question God like that? He's going to burn you in hell. And with always the inherent threat that you can be ostracized from the community for asking those questions. And so we see the results of that, a bunch of people who are absolutely unwilling to even consider that their theology might be off a tad, if not completely.
And let's say that it wasn't off, right? Let's say that it is completely accurate for when it was written. So if we're going to progress in other parts of our society and culture, why is this the only thing that you don't possibly think could progress in any way, shape, or form? Like, it's archaic, you know? And if we're going to progress as people, I just don't see how you think that everything that is in this book is 100%, because that's not factually possible. There's so many contradictions in the Bible that makes me question, like, have you actually read it? So that's always the question that I have.
Isn't it fun when people are like, you're like, well, Jesus never condemned slavery. Well, that was in the context of the culture there, Okay, so maybe any condemnation of homosexuality, which I think is a mistranslation, but even if it's not, could it be that was a cultural context that no longer exists? No, that's literal. That's literal, brother. You got to take that. Bible says it. I believe it.
Well, and that is the thing, right? Is that we do not critically read or critically analyze the text of Scripture. And that is the big cognitive dissonance that's been put in place in the American evangelical system, is like, don't question things, don't wonder about things. Like, if it, the Bible says it, it's true. And so, like, that also means that, like, if my kids go out tomorrow and make fun of a bald guy, like, 2 bears ought to come out of the woods and maul them and eat their insides, like, because that's what Scripture says. So, like, I think that we don't have good, we're not good students of Scripture. And that's something I encourage people on a lot, is we have to read the Bible for biblical context, which we're taught about from day one, which is true, context in and of itself, right? But then also cultural context, historical context, all of those things matter deeply when we are reading old documents. We don't look at the Gettysburg Address, from the 1860s the way that we do in 2023. We understand that there is context around what is happening inside of that speech given by Abraham Lincoln at Gettysburg. We don't look
at the Constitution came down from Sinai on stone tablets.
Right, on stone tablets. Therefore, we have the right to bear arms.
Absolutely.
That reminds me of one of my favorite, and this is my guilty pleasure, is Family Guy. But it reminds me of a Family Guy episode where a guy it's Thomas Jefferson, and he's sitting there and he's writing he's writing like the Declaration of Independence or whatever, or the Constitution, and he's sitting there, and behind him above the fire is two giant bear arms, like literal arms of bears. And he's like, yeah, everyone has the right to bear arms. There's no way they get that wrong.
Oh my gosh.
It's like,
that's great.
But I think
it's like, it would be like Paul, he gets a letter from a church saying, what do we do about this group of women who are causing trouble?
Yes,
and
exactly.
He's like, tell the women to be silent in the church. And somebody over the shoulder is like, do you think there's a chance in 2023 they may translate that as women should never preach? And he's like, nobody's that stupid. Come on.
Well, I ask people,
off the letter.
I ask people a lot. I'm like, have you sent like emails or letters or text messages that you thought in 2,000 years from now, people are going to take this and they're going to live by it like jot and tittle, like not even question it. Like, you would be stupid to think that. And so for us to not look at scripture contextually is ignorant. And for us to look at worldly individuals like an Apostle Paul or a Jonah or some of these other people that we've mentioned through a critical lens is ridiculous. Like, we have to look at the positives and the negatives. Like you said, Paul, like Romans is a beautiful piece of literature. So was Paul homophobic? Yeah, probably. But did he also write some really powerful things as well that we can probably take to heart? Yeah. It's kind of like the same thing of like, President Washington setting a really good example and a precedence for our leadership structure inside the United States of America while also being a slaveholder. Like, we have to take the good and the bad. No one is inherently good or inherently evil. We are all just people who make good and bad decisions through the context of our lives based on our historical and cultural context.
Yeah. And a lot of what we're reading is like, it would be like if I wrote today, if life gives you lemons, ... And then somebody reads that 2,000 years from now, they're like, wow, lemons are really important. We really need to get some lemons. It's like, that's not what I was saying. I'm not saying drink a lot of lemonade, and so we have to understand
They're
what
just
was happening.
Stacking lemons. Like, he said it. It must be so.
I mean, I'm not even the same person I was when I wrote for my Facebook statuses like 10 years ago. So
say that.
You know what I mean?
Say that.
Well, and as we come to the end of this, I think where the trauma thing again becomes important to be able to say to one another, I experienced trauma, and I'm still having PTSD like responses out of it, is like, I think all of us probably get messages from people on a regular basis who say, I'm deconstructing, but there's still this little voice that tells me I'm taking my children to hell. That am I sure I'm okay, that I'm not wounding my family somehow? And I just think we have to acknowledge, like, that is a response to trauma, and it is something that needs to be processed and go to a therapist, go to a friend, and really work those things through, or it will continue to have an impact on us.
I have a sweater that says you can have Jesus and a therapist too, and that's what I live
by.
It's just, it's what I live by. So I hope people do realize that it's okay.
Yeah. Yeah. I think realizing that the words and the teachings of Jesus are eternal, they're things that are greater. And everything else is very finite and very, in the moment, you know, and just realizing that, you know, no matter what walk of life we're in, I'm sure, like, you know, I mean, today I feel as healthy as I've ever been, but 10 years from now, I'll be at my therapist complaining about things that happen now. And it's because through our journey, we unveil and dissect, and unpack things that are not healthy or harmful to us, that we realize through our growth that we're not healthy and harmful. And so giving yourself permission to say, yes, I experienced trauma through my religious experience. Yes, I experienced a difficult time. And can I just say this tonight? I want to say this as well. It is not a contest. Like, just because, and I think Malynda, you actually said this, in our pre-show meeting, like, you know, just because I wasn't raped by a priest, right, doesn't mean that your religious trauma doesn't matter. Right. It doesn't have to be what you consider, what you consider extreme. Right. Because trauma is emotional, it's spiritual, it cuts deep on every single level. And so giving yourself permission to work through that, to understand that you've experienced it, is extremely important.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And realizing how gaslit we've been by it all, to be told, don't trust your feelings, don't trust your emotions, don't listen to, that could be Satan's voice. You know, I say it all the time to my clients, people I work with, trust yourself. There is something amazing inside of you. And yes, get input externally as well, because sometimes we can't see the whole picture of ourselves. But if we start with trusting ourselves, that Jesus said he didn't come to condemn, but to sozo, that go and sin no more, which I think is arguable about what it really means, came well after Jesus put himself between the people with the rocks, the ones that wanted to stone the woman, and the woman. He risked his life and reputation for her, drove away all condemnation from her, and then declared her not condemned before ever dealing with the actions that brought them there in the first place. And if we just start to see ourselves as, yeah, I've been that woman caught in adultery. I've been that woman at the well. I've been the outsider, but that's not the definition of who I am as a human being in the eyes of heaven. Things start to change for us.
We greatly misunderstand the word sin. Like we don't even understand what it means. Like it's literally a term that was coined in the medieval times of like archery tournaments and things like that. Like, and what it means is a sin is to completely miss the mark. Like not the bullseye, just the entire target.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. You've missed the entire thing. And so, I think it is very important for us to understand, if Jesus tells somebody to go and sin no more, what he's saying is go on towards your target. Like, go on towards what is planned for you. Go toward the bullseye that lays in front of you. Don't stray from it, but just go for what you're made for. And so, this misunderstanding that it's like, some kind of major, like, well, if you even miss by an inch, like, you have sinned. It's not that. Like, it's literally not.
You're guilty of all sin.
Yeah.
Right.
It's not.
And then you just walk through life never getting it right, or feeling like you're never getting it right, because
But that's how they control you.
Yes.
It is like it's the cult handbook. Rule number 1 is control the women, and rule number 2 is to like make everybody feel like shit. Like if we tell you how bad you feel,
and we're the only ones that can make you pure and right again.
Of course.
Exactly. Yeah. We're the only ones. We're the only ones that have the way.
Man.
And by the way, James says in the book of James, it says, to the person that knows to do right and does it not, to them it's sin, which there is also an inherent saying of, like, the woman caught in adultery probably had no other choice, no other way to live than prostitution. And so Jesus would say, okay, go, don't ever eat again, because society doesn't give you any other way to earn money. So just go die now. There's no way a loving God would say that.
Yeah.
At all.
No, that's good. This is a great conversation, friends.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think we should have Malynda back next week.
I think we absolutely should have Malynda back next week, and we should have some great conversation then.
I agree.
I love it. I love it.
Very cool. Well, thanks for being with us tonight, Malynda. And
thanks
for being with us, Jeremy.
No, I'm glad to be here. I love it here. Yeah, absolutely. So,
and April, we miss you. We miss you, dear.
Yeah, we miss April for sure. All right, don't forget, join the Evangelicalish community. You can go to evangelicalish.com and you can join there. $4.99 a month. It just supports all the work that we're doing. We put a lot of time and effort to make sure that you guys, that y'all is the better word there, have it's more inclusive. We Southerners, we knew, and so.
Yeah, because we can't say you guys anymore.
You guys. And plus that just makes me cringe anyway. So we want to make sure that y'all have the best content and that the conversations matter. So come and join us on Facebook and all of our social medias. We have a private Facebook group that you can join. Really great conversation and interaction that happened there with just a lot of like-minded, like-hearted folks, and it's a safe space. There's a couple of quick questions. Please make sure and answer those as you enter into that space, just so that we kind of know that you're agreeing to the rules of the space.
Yeah.
But otherwise,
real quick, Malynda, where can people find you?
Yes,
you can find me on Instagram, kind of Twitter. It's not the same as it used to be, but at Malynda Hale, and on TikTok, Malynda Hale Official.
Oh God, DeSantis is going to be on with Elon on Twitter. Holy shit!
Well, I think it happened already, didn't it?
And they couldn't get it to work. And
is that is beautiful.
I'm not kidding. I'm dead.
There is a God. There is a God.
It was actually kind of embarrassing and also like,
well, okay.
Great note to end on.
Take us home, Jeremy.
All right, y'all. Thank you so much for listening this evening. If you would do us a favor, leave us a 5-star review on your favorite podcast platform, especially on Apple and Spotify, and write a review. Let people know why they should join the Evangelicalish community as well. For Pastor Paul and Malynda Hale, who has been an absolutely incredible guest host this evening, I'm Jeremy, and we will see you next week. Same time, same channel.